Welcome, everyone, to the very first webinar in our 2019 series. I'm Nellie Gontier, Education and Training Specialist for Parkinson Canada. We hope you're keeping warm on this really cold last day of January. The month has really flown by, and we're fully geared up for an exciting year of events that Parkinson Canada has planned for you. And I'm very excited to be moderating today's webinar on Parkinson's disease and dance. We're fortunate to have two guests with us today. David Leventhal and Rachel Barr will be talking to us about the benefits of dance for people with Parkinson's. Today's discussion will focus on the physical and psychosocial benefits of dance. We'll be diving down into the research and the key attributes that make dance a valuable and supportive intervention for people living with Parkinson's and their families. To start, let me share a little about each of our guest speakers. David is a founding teacher and program director for Dance for PD, a program of the Mark Morris Dance Group that has now been used as a model for classes in more than 300 communities in 25 countries. He personally leads classes for people with Parkinson's around the world and trains other teachers in the Dance for PD approach. He has co-produced 3 volumes of successful at-home videos on DVD for the program and has been instrumental in initiating and designing innovative projects involving live streaming and moving through Glass, a dance-based Google Glass app for people with Parkinson's. He received the 2016 World Parkinson Congress Award for Distinguished Contribution to the Parkinson's community and was a co-recipient of the 2013 Alan Bonender Humanitarian Award from the Parkinson's Unity Walk. He is also featured in the award-winning 2014 documentary Capturing Grace, directed by Dave Iverson. As a dancer, he performed with the Mark Morris Dance Group from 1997 to 2011, appearing in principal roles in some of the group's most celebrated works. He graduated from Brown University in Rhode Island with an honors degree in English literature. Our second guest, Rachel, is a graduate of Canada's National Ballet School's professional ballet program. She has danced professionally with the English National Ballet and the Israel Ballet before pursuing academic studies. Rachel is currently completing her PhD in psychology as a Vanier Scholar at Ryerson University in Toronto. Her research focuses on the benefits of dance for people living with Parkinson's disease and other older populations, as well as an arts-based translation of health research. Rachel also manages health and research initiatives at Canada's National Ballet School and is part of the team developing and researching the school's dance initiatives for older adults. Before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Synovian, for making this webinar possible through an unrestricted educational grant. I want to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded for future viewing. You'll be able to access the recording by visiting our website at www.parkinson.ca or by visiting our YouTube channel, The Knowledge Network. To report any technical issues at any time during the webinar, please go to the menu at the right of your screen. To open and close this menu, click on the red tab. Use the To Admin and Ask a Question buttons to type in and submit your request. We ask that all other questions be reserved for the end of the presentation, at which time our speakers will answer them. Please ask questions that are of a general nature, not intended to obtain medical advice. We'll make every effort to answer all questions. And with that, please join me in welcoming our guests, David Leventhal and Rachel Barr.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to share this work with all of you. Rachel and I will be sharing this presentation, so I'm going to talk a bit about the beginning. I'm going to talk at the beginning about the background and rationale for the program, give you sort of how we established the program and some of the thinking around why dance seemed to be a good fit for people with Parkinson's, and then I'm going to transition over to Rachel, who will give more background and information about the research that's been done, and will provide a really comprehensive summary about what research is out there, what still needs to be done, and what we know. So the program began in 2001 at the Mark Morris Dance Center in Brooklyn, and we started the program really as a collaboration between our dance company and a local support group called the Brooklyn Parkinson Group. When we started, really, we had an aim to immerse participants in what we hoped would be an artistic experience. I think this is really important in understanding the difference between the Dance for Parkinson's programs and other kinds of movement programs that are out there, that we are addressing movement from an artistic standpoint. We're addressing movement from the perspective of dancers. How do dancers think about movement? When Oli Westheimer first started her support group around 1999, 2000, she soon became aware that people with Parkinson's felt trapped by their symptoms. They felt constrained by the medicalized nature of their lives. They spent a lot of time thinking about and worrying about and being aware of symptoms and challenges that they had. And these challenges often came out in support group meetings in a way that were helpful to talk about, but that didn't really have any kind of resolution. And Oli, who had a dance background, started to think about ways that she could provide other kinds of support. She thought about taking people for a walk in the park. She thought about taking people to museums, but she started thinking back to her own dance background. And she thought about the way that a dance class can become a community, can become a way for people to meet socially and connect and to do something meaningful together. So I think the first thing that came to mind for her was, let's escape from the constraints of a typical support group and do something that's more interactive, more social. It gives people a sense of belonging. And she was also aware from her own dance background of the strategies that dancers use to execute movement. And when she started thinking about these strategies, she started thinking about the fact that each and every one of these elements had a very direct connection with one of the challenges that people with Parkinson's were encountering. So, for example, intentional movement. Dancers spend a lot of time training to make every movement count, to make every movement have meaning, and to express to an audience. And she thought about that in the context of Parkinson's, where people often have difficulty initiating movement and organizing their movement in a way that can project or express. And she thought, well, is there information that dancers have about making their movement intentional that could be useful to people with Parkinson's? And perhaps through that process, through that exchange, there's benefit. She wasn't sure. At this time, when we started in 2001, there was no research about the impact of dance. Parkinson's. There was some research about physiotherapy interventions. And when you go through each one of these words, whether it's balanced, or rhythmic, controlled, strategic, interactive, sequenced, you start to think about the things that start to go away with Parkinson's. Let's think about sequencing, for example, the roadmap that people have for moving from point A to point B to point C, or daily gesture 1 to daily gesture 2. Sometimes that takes more thought with Parkinson's than it does for people without Parkinson's. And as it turns out, that kind of sequencing is exactly what dancers do to execute movement in an organized way. We learn it methodically, we practice it in a certain sequence, and then that sequence starts to become second nature. So again, that idea of what do dancers know and how can it be useful to people with Parkinson's is the core concept of the program. Oli decided to find a home at the Mark Mars Dance Center. We did not set out to start a Dance for Parkinson's program. We were actually approached by Oli and by the Parkinson group and asked if we would consider offering this class. Our philosophy, based really on Mark Mars's personal philosophy, is that dance is for anybody. So everybody should have the right to dance. Everybody should have access to wonderful, high-quality dance experiences. And the Mark Mars Dance Center, which opened in 2001, was really built to celebrate this idea of everybody dancing. Mark had grown up in Seattle and had participated in a community school that was very much aligned with this philosophy. Not so much a philosophy around recitals and performances and levels, but really about how can this center reflect who's in the community, and how can we provide opportunities for people in that community to dance? So it was a really good match and a really good fit. I think one of the other elements that made it a good fit was that Mark's aesthetic is very gestural. It's very natural. There's not a lot of artifice in what he does, and it's very musical. And we'll come to that a little bit later. So the basis of this program is really what I would call, and what Ken Bartlett from the Foundation for Community Dance has called, the artistic imperative. We are entering into this experience as teaching artists, and participants are entering into the experience as artists, not as patients, right? They're not trying to come in to solve a problem. We don't use clinical language in the class. We are approaching every element of the class, whether it's music, whether it's rhythm, whether it's imagery, as artists, and thinking about those elements to create a certain expression, right? A certain kind of statement physically that is quite different, I think, from an exercise class, where you're going in with a specific target related to strength or flexibility or balance, but you're not necessarily trying to express anything. In this class, all of the techniques that we're working on are really allowing people, we hope, to find a certain internal expressive sense and their own voice, and by doing that, to be empowered. So the artistic imperative meant that this program really needed to be situated within an arts context, whether that's a dance company like Mark Morris Dance Group, and you can see these photos are two of them on the left and right are of me as a dancer. So translating that information that I learned as a dancer into this class, or whether they're based in a training facility like Canada's National Ballet School. In either case, we are in the business of training or creating or nurturing artists. And so when people with Parkinson's come in to that community, they are also nurtured as artists. So let's go through some of the elements that I think as a dancer make dance particularly important for people with Parkinson's. And then Rachel, in a few minutes, will drill down into some of those details as they come out in the research. So the first is that dance is an excellent physical activity, on par with other forms of exercise, in that it does address strength building, flexibility, stamina, and balance, four things that you would expect to see in any kind of good, well-designed Parkinson's exercise intervention. And I think this t-shirt on the left here is a wonderful, funny way of describing just how physically challenging dance training can be. And here on the right, one of our participants, Adolf, is doing a tap exercise between two bars for extra support, and is enjoying that experience. And that's something that's very important, that yes, dance is a physical experience. It is a form of exercise, but there's a sense of creativity and enjoyment that is a very important element of that. And this is really where we start to diverge from a standard treadmill or stationary bike intervention, that we're working on mastering specific movement skills, but through enjoyable repetition. I bring up George Balanchine here because Balanchine really was able to connect the technical demands and requirements of his dancers to a very specific aesthetic goal that relied on that technique, but was not that technique alone. And we really do the same thing in our class. Yes, we'll work on technical elements, but all we're giving people, or aiming to give people, a sense of confidence and self-esteem and powers of expression that you get as a dancer. This is another very important element of dance training, and I think another important point of difference from other forms of movement, in that dance is first and foremost a mental activity. It is a cognitive activity. We are sequencing movement. We are mirroring movement. We're asking our dancers to improvise and create movement spontaneously. And we're also asking them to remember movement from week to week, from moment to moment. So these four areas of cognitive stimulation are incredibly important for dance training, but they also happen to be really important for people with Parkinson's, right? If you're walking down the street, you want to be able to learn how to mirror the movement, the walking pace of someone in front of you so that you can perhaps avoid a freeze. You have to be able to improvise at certain times of the day when there isn't a set phrase, or you may be a little bit confused about which way to go. You have to figure that out. You have to problem solve. And we talked earlier about the value of thinking about movement as a set of, as a sentence, right? As a sequence. And how valuable that could be for something as simple as getting out of a chair, right? So getting out of a chair, thought about choreographically, could be of great benefit rather than trying to think about it mechanically. Music is a huge boost in our program. We use it to help people initiate movement. We use it to help people regain that sense of internal rhythm that's often lost in Parkinson's. And we also use it as a guide. And this is a bit more broad. Yes, you could say that the rhythm of the music is a guide, but I would say as well the emotional tone of the music, the nostalgic elements of music that we know, the form of that music, whether it's ABA or whether it's chorus and verse format, that gives us possibilities for how to frame movement and how to remember movement. So music is this wonderful guide. You'll hear Cindy talking about it a little bit later in one of our films that supports everything that we do. And we know that there's a great challenge among our participants to find a sense of connection to rhythm and a sense of connection to their own internal clocks. And music gives them a way to use these external oral cues to help them organize their physical expression. This is another really important element. We've talked about this a little bit already, but the sense that dancers are using their movements to express ideas, to express emotions, to express a story. We're not just going through the movements because somebody told us to. And this is really an important element because it allows people with Parkinson's to start to embody their movement and start to get back to that sense that they can express themselves through their bodies. One of the things that we've heard participants talk about is the challenge of being disconnected from your body, the challenge of thinking one thing and not being able to express that thing to somebody else. So in class, we work a lot on expressive movement, big movement, movement that tells a story, movement that has a relationship to somebody else. And through this, people are able to regain a sense of what it means to use your body to express, to say something, to have value, and to give meaning. Alongside this, I think, is this idea that dancers use aesthetic goals, right? So if you're thinking about lifting your arm, you could talk about lifting that arm in a mechanical way. I'd like you to lift your arm 45 degrees and come back down. And that might work for some people. But a lot of people have difficulty with that kind of mechanical goal. And they say, well, if I could do that, I would do that. What we try to do in the dance class is take some of those same movements, but apply a very strong sense of imagery and aesthetics to that. So I might say, instead of lifting your arm 45 degrees, I'd like you to imagine lifting your arm like a swan. What does that feel like? How does a swan or other bird move its wing, right? And what is the quality of that movement? Now I've given people an imaginative cue, right? They don't have to go into their movement memory. They can go into their imagination to draw from in order to initiate that movement. But what I've also done is I've given people permission to execute that movement in different ways. And that's very important because in a group setting, which is primarily where these classes take place, we have people at all levels of ability and all levels of mobility. And for somebody who's not able to move their arm up to 45 degrees, it might be quite frustrating to be given that cue. However, if I give them the cue of moving like a swan, or imagine that you're flapping your wing, well, that allows them to move however they wish, and it refocuses the attention onto movement quality, right? So the output is not so much about how high, how far, how long, but about how. How do we do this? How can we think about this movement? And I think for people who struggle with movement and who are frustrated, sometimes by movement that they're told to do, to be empowered to focus on the quality of the movement is a wonderful, liberating element of what we do. It also allows people to participate for their lifespan. So they can always come back to the class because, again, we're focused on movement quality as the access point. That's not to say that we're not encouraging people to move big and to move with large amplitude. We are, but we're giving them an access point that's based in the imagination. Finally, there's the social aspect, coming back to really Oli's original goal, right? Her original goal was to get people together. How can we have them connect socially? In dance class, we are dancing together. We're interacting. This gives people a sense of value. It gives people a sense of connection that counteracts some of the loneliness they might feel from being disconnected in other parts of their life. And it also gives them a very strong motivation to come back. And I think we'll see this in some of the research, that the adherence rates in the dance classes are very, very high. Because even if people can't do all of the movements, even if they're not sure about themselves as dancers, they know that they have a place in that class, that they belong to a community, and regardless of how they're feeling that day, they want to go and be with their friends. And that's a very important element of the class. So this is one of the key points that we emphasize. And I think what you'll see is that dance becomes really a constellation of things that address head on, but in a very enjoyable way, everything that Parkinson's challenges. When we think about these four areas, right, the physical, the cognitive, the expressive, and the social, these are all things that people with Parkinson's experience challenges in. And dance really addresses each of these areas in very particular and unique ways. And I think this constellation aspect, this constellation benefit, has been noticed by some of our colleagues in neurology. This is Dr. Mahat, who works in Sydney, Australia, and he talks about the importance of physical activity and social interaction and mental stimulation, and says dance repeated gives all three of those. And one of our closest partners and colleagues in Stanford University in California recognizes as well the importance of physical activity and social interaction. But she says it's much more than that. She actually mentions, and this is maybe unusual for neurologists to mention this publicly, but she mentions the value of self-image and joy. And I think these are critical elements when we're looking at a dance class. These are the elements also that are a bit harder to research. So that's why I included this quote, because even medical experts in Parkinson's are recognizing the value of these elements in maintaining a healthy life and maintaining balance and maintaining a sense of well-being when living with Parkinson's. And in fact, Dr. Bronte Stewart felt so strongly about the value of dance that when they built the new Neuroscience Institute at Stanford, where the Movement Disorder Center is, she built a dance studio there. You can see her on the left. She has her hands on the ballet bar, and she has a big smile on her face because she knows that her patients are experiencing dance classes there twice a week. So as we wrap up here, I wanted to kind of emphasize the program's breadth, that because we don't focus on a specific movement form, but really focus on a mix of different movement styles that we think are helpful for people with Parkinson's, we've been able to expand into 25 countries, including countries that have a very different dance and Parkinson's culture than Canada or the United States. In order to do this, we offer teacher training and resources for dancers and care partners, people with Parkinson's, and the medical community. And for those who can't get out of their homes or want to do extra dancing in the course of their week in between their group classes, we do offer DVDs, streams that we do with our partners here at the National Ballet School, as well as some home-based programs. One of the things that's been really exciting about the program is the interest that we've gotten from a number of partners in different disciplines, whether they're performing arts institutions, Parkinson's associations, healthcare organizations, universities. A lot of people come together to nurture and support this kind of programming. And that's also allowed us to reach a lot of different audiences, not just people with Parkinson's, but their care partners allied health professionals like physiotherapists and occupational therapists. And I wanted to finish with a quote from, I think, our most important constituents, who are our participants. Really, as we start to talk a bit about the research, I think we always want to come back to them. They are really the source of our understanding of what seems to happen, and they are always our primary audience. When we think about designing a program, their needs and their wants are always first and foremost in our mind. The music and movement started, I was filled with great joy. There's that word again, joy. I was able to take the whole class and walk out feeling accomplished and encouraged, with that passion for dance rekindled. I saw endless possibilities. I think this is really one of the key elements. In addition to all of those motor skills and cognitive skills and social skills that we're building, that sense of feeling accomplished, encouraged, and empowered is really, at the end of the day, I think some of the most important benefit of what we're working on. So I'm going to pass it over to Rachel here.
Thanks, David. So I'm going to talk more about formal research, but I want to start off by just saying that this research is important, but as David described, and both of us having been dancers and having lived as dancers, we know, we see our dancers in our Parkinson's classes dancing. We know that they're experiencing benefits on all different levels. The reason that we are engaging in formal research is because we are working with people, obviously, that are in need of health interventions, and there is a level of accountability, as there should be, when we're talking about health interventions. And so when I'm going to describe some of the research, I feel strongly it's really just the tip of the iceberg, because to really capture how much these programs mean to our participants, I mean, it's a joy for us to be in the classes and experience it with them. It can't fully be captured, but we are determined to give it a try so that we can help disseminate this intervention to help with the knowledge translation, so that more people are learning about the programs that are out there and benefiting from them. So to begin with, there is actually a growing and international body of evidence that describes the benefits of dance for people with Parkinson's disease. And just to contextualize that, there are a lot of great complementary therapies or interventions for people with Parkinson's. I find the community extremely inspiring in that it is quite well connected. I was very moved at the last World Parkinson Congress to see how many people are getting out there, both people living with Parkinson's, clinicians, healthcare providers, to really make the experience of living with Parkinson's something that can be navigated with a chin up and with a positive outlook. And while there are all these different interventions that are popping up, the literature that supports dance is much more established than a lot of the other fields. And some of that is because some of them are just starting up. But when we're talking about accountability, I think it's important to emphasize that. So I'm referencing here in this slide a search that I did in 2017, where I looked for peer-reviewed articles in academic journals that reference dance and Parkinson's disease. And what I came up with was 37 primary research studies that have been investigating the effects of dance for people. That more have come out since this search was done. 15 of these were pilot or feasibility studies. So these, important to understand, this is really first stage research. So very important, it has to be done. This is really a curiosity stage of research where you're looking at what are, I think that there's something here, what can we capture? And things are being captured in these studies. But that is a first stage of research, and typically, especially in healthcare research, the expectation is that more research has to build on those studies. I want to highlight that 5 of the studies included qualitative data, and David referenced joy, he referenced the experience of the class. And one of the challenges with adhering to traditional health intervention research is that it's typically quantitative, and that is great to capture people's improvements in their balance, in their posture, etc. But it's not great necessarily to really, for example, to capture joy. And sure, there are measures to do that, but it's not. I can look at a number, or a graph, but it's just not being able to say really how meaningful we know that these programs are for our dancers, because we see it. So really important that there has begun to be more qualitative research on this intervention. 14 of the studies compare dance to non-dance control groups, which is really important. So that's actually moving on beyond that first phase of research, that feasibility stage, to starting to compare dance to other interventions, and to such as exercise or physiotherapy, to really see how it looks compared to other activities. 8 of these were actually randomized control trials, so that is even more stringent in that people didn't get to choose, if you were doing this intervention or that intervention. So it helps to control for, whether somebody really likes to dance and so would therefore be motivated and may improve more. The largest study in this review in terms of participants had 75 participants. So that's a reasonable amount. Most were far fewer. But again, compared to standards in healthcare research, that's a relatively small number. And so this is a critique of the literature to date. However, just to play devil's advocate, if you are a researcher, healthcare professional out there, it is important to consider how much research is necessary. This is non-invasive. This is proven to be a safe, cost-efficient, and meaningful intervention for people. And so I think it's a new, relatively new area of research in health, specifically arts and health, where we're of course want to adhere to the highest level, highest standards of accountability, but we also need to ask ourselves what that should be for these different non-pharmaceutical interventions. Also, I'll say that 8 review papers I found had summarized this body of research. So not only is there a substantial amount of research, but there's also papers that have sort of solidified and captured what we know about dance, and we have very clear outcomes that we can now say. So in terms of physical benefits, so people living with Parkinson's that dance may experience improvement in balance, in gait, endurance, so all really significant physical elements, and specifically motor impairment or symptom severity as measured by the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, which is a pretty standard measure that's used internationally. A decrease of motor impairment has been found in people with Parkinson's who dance. In terms of psychological benefits, so I've broken this down into cognitive and mood, and it really speaks to what David was saying about the different sort of inherent components of dance. I would say, I would expect to see these benefits in anybody that was dancing, in a child who's dancing, in any senior who's dancing, in a professional dancer. These benefits. So cognitively, people with Parkinson's who are dancing have been shown to experience better executive functioning. So that's really planning and organizing their lives, and also visual spatial function you would expect. So navigating tasks through space, that is something that you're asked to do when you're dancing, and these improvements have also been captured in formal research. What's been captured is a reduction in fatigue. So that could even be simply because you're getting more exercise, and we know that exercise can help you sleep better. So really, dance has all the benefits of any traditional exercise program, but it's just that there's just so much more. And then in terms of mood improvement, so we've seen reduced symptoms of depression, which we know can be highly comorbid with Parkinson's disease. So very significant. Less feelings of anger has also been noted in literature, and really importantly, improved sense of quality of life, which really makes a lot of sense given everything we've been describing. How being part of a dance program isn't just about like an individual, doing some sort of intervention. It really can be a meaningful experience people experience weekly or more than once a week. So really important that has also been captured in the literature. In terms of social benefits, so things that have specifically been captured in formal research, we see reduced social isolation, improved social life, and also an increase in the number of social activities in which people participate. And that's not just because now they've added a dance class to their week. Obviously, that will increase the number of their social activities. But for example, what we see in our program here at Canada's National Ballet School, after the classes, our groups always meet and have we serve cookies and tea, which they love, and they'll sit there and socialize. But then we'll find that they may have plans that afternoon together, or they've made plans during the week together. So really, it's a community that's built so beautifully that I've seen over the 5 years we've had the program here at the ballet school, and it's kind of an access point. So you have one reason to get out of the house, your excuse, I'm going to this dance class, but that really can open up the floodgates for this community, and that's certainly what I've seen, and the research would support that. Also important to say that caregivers, partners, husbands, wives that join in the class also report improved personal well-being, and you see a mix. You see, partners come in and they sit next to each other, and one is very much supporting the other. We also have partners that come in and, they don't even sit next to each other. They're basically doing the class for each other, and the person who doesn't have Parkinson's is just enjoying the class because, as we've been saying, dance is really universal. So yes, it is designed for people with Parkinson's and accessible to that population, but it's accessible to everyone. So even though now I've gone over some of the evidence that does support this intervention, there are still some barriers to get people out there and dancing, and we recognize that, and that's one of the reasons or the inspirations for creating the Dance for Parkinson's Network Canada. So this is a partnership between Canada's National Ballet School, the Mark Morris Dance Group's Dance for PD, Dancing with Parkinson's Canada, and of course Parkinson Canada. And the four organizations came together really with the intention of supporting as many people with Parkinson's dancing as possible. And to do that, we've created an online consortium, so you can find it at dancepdnetwork.ca. It's on the slide. And we've tried to find all of the places in Canada where dance classes for people with Parkinson's are being offered. And currently it's not in every province and territory, but we are getting there. We put this consortium online. You can also go there and find all of the references that I've spoken about in this presentation, and many more. And we also created this to really foster community. So that's for dance teachers or practitioners that are doing dance for people with Parkinson's to have an opportunity to connect and talk about best practices, talk about approaches. We have David's been speaking specifically about Dance for PD, but there are several different approaches to dance for people with Parkinson's that are being offered in the country. So we've had some great discussions with different communities about their approaches and putting our heads together. So I'd really encourage you to go to this site so that you do have access to programs. And most of these programs are either free, if possible, or relatively low cost. People that start these programs are intentionally trying to make them accessible to the Parkinson community. And in that spirit, because David and I knew we were doing this webinar, we actually reached out to our members. So those are all the dance teachers out there. And we asked them if for April, Parkinson Awareness Month, if they would run an open house class. And 13 of our sites were able to say yes, we would be able to do that. So hopefully there's a site near you where you can go and try a class. So these classes are going to happen in April. Each site has a different day and time. So we're going to post that schedule with this webinar when it's posted after it's done. What I will ask you, though, is to make sure that you please RSVP the site you intend to attend, because I know our dance teachers want to make sure that they have enough chairs, that they have enough support in the room. Now, I also want to say, people listening, I would encourage, of course, people with Parkinson's to come out to these, but also if you're listening, you're a healthcare provider or a researcher, a lot of the work that I do in arts-based knowledge translation is about experiential knowledge translation. And I don't think anything could be more relevant for the experience of dance than actually doing it. So I know it's been really meaningful when I've been able to dance with neurologists or other healthcare professionals working with people with Parkinson's to actually dance along with people that they see on a daily basis. So this is an invitation to anyone that's listening to come and join a class near you. But I will emphasize that, of course, that you do RSVP. So with that, I wanted to sort of leave everyone with some next steps or a call to action, because I do feel, dance for people with Parkinson's has really, really been well established in the last decade, but there is more work to be done. And so if you're a researcher and you're listening to this, some of the things I highlighted were the need for more randomized control trials, larger samples, and longer term studies. That's really what needs to be done. Again, as I was talking, not because we don't already know that dance is good for people with Parkinson's, but just because, of course, we want to rise to the level of accountability that other health interventions require. If you are a healthcare professional and you're listening to this webinar, I really encourage you to talk to your patients and clients about dance, and also talk to your colleagues about it, because I've spoken to neurologists that some have thought it was great, but not maybe thought it was their role to communicate this information, or not felt comfortable about it. And I think it's important to have those conversations. What could make you feel more comfortable about it? What other barriers might there be? If it's, you don't have time to talk to patients, is there information you can leave for them in the waiting room? Given where the research is at, I'd really encourage you to consider your stance on disseminating this knowledge, because it holds a lot of potential for the people that you work with. And of course, finally, for people living with PD, I would definitely encourage you to start dancing and to keep dancing. I think, David, we were going to, before we went to questions, we were going to just end off with a little video for inspiration. So I'm going to switch to that now.
I've learned to value myself more, which is quite a gift. When I'm slumping, I say to myself, I'm a dancer. I have to sit up straight. I am a dancer. And it gives me motivation to take better care of myself. When the medicine is working, I can almost do everything. It's just that the amounts of time get shorter and shorter when it functions. Parkinson's forces you to reveal your vulnerabilities. Otherwise people mostly try to put on their best face, their best appearance. I'm going out in public, I have to put on this and that, and I have to put my overcoat, button it up tight. Well, you can't, if you're going with Parkinson's and you can't button it, you're revealed, there's no way about it. What happens to me when my feet feel like glue and they're stuck on the floor, I sometimes cannot walk, but I can dance. If I can give you an example. Shall I start?
Yeah.
Well, for example, right now I'm off. You can see my hand is shaking. I have the tremor. And if I try to walk, I have a great deal of difficulty. I could walk a little bit, but if I pretend I'm dancing, I could go. And I don't have any problems. The music leads. In other words, it's not my brain telling me to take a step or to do this or do that. The music is leading me. So I'm like following this wonderful leader who's so mysterious and has such a lovely sound, and it's going to take me to some other place.
What is that other place?
Well, excuse me. It's a place where you're weightless. You know, your body is just flies. It doesn't tug at you, tug you and pull you and push you and have you in these knots where you can't move and you can't think and you're struggling and fighting. It just, you go above that.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, David, for a wonderfully informative and eye-opening session. It was very enjoyable and also touching to watch. I'm sure our audience learned a lot, and many of you are probably already looking for dance programs near you. Not to worry, I want to let everyone know that Parkinson Canada will be posting a document on our website with the locations, dates, and times for the open houses mentioned in today's webinar. As we begin the question and answer portion of our session, we want to remind you that we value our feedback. After the close of this session, you will be redirected to a short survey. We ask that you please take a minute and provide us with your feedback. Your input is so important, and it will help us identify topics of interest for future webinars, as well as help us better meet your needs. And we will now open the forum for questions. Our first question from one of our participants came in a little earlier. The question is, and this is to either of you, do these benefits follow primarily from dance classes as opposed to dancing with a partner to known steps?
So that's a great question. The literature has actually studied several different approaches to dance, and all of them appear to have benefits. Some of them have unique benefits. So for example, there's a lot of tango that's been studied specifically. Partner dancing and actually different types of partner dancing have even been compared. And there may be some specific benefits that are greater in some than others because that's specifically what you're doing for the entire session. But it seems and it looks like if you're dancing, you're going to benefit. You're going to experience the benefits I've described.
And I'll just add that I think all dance forms share similar DNA. So even though we all end up looking different, we all have a very similar DNA. In terms of those movement primitives, things like weight shift, balance, bending the knees, interaction with others, moving to music, coordination, multitasking. So whether you're doing tango or salsa or ballet or improvisation, really you're going to hit the same target, so to speak, regardless of what form. We do integrate some partner dance in our class, but it's not all of what we do, whereas in an Argentine tango class, it's going to be primarily partners. So some of it also has to do with the individual's preference, so what they really want to do.
Well, along those same lines, and in relation to the video that you just showed everyone here, what is it about music and dancing that changes a person living with Parkinson's ability to go from perhaps freezing of gait to moving fluidly?
Well, we haven't formally been able to answer that question, but here's what some people that theorize propose. We have several motor circuits in the brain. That means several different ways that we initiate movement. And it looks very different if it's a habitual movement, like walking, or if it's a more complex and intentional or unusual movement. It also looks different if it's being triggered or initiated by a musical cue or a rhythmic cue. And there is a lot of research since the 90s that has come out about rhythmic cueing for people with Parkinson's disease as a way to initiate movement. And so while it's tricky to capture exactly what it is, it's certainly the dots have been connected in that the rhythmic cueing that is part of music and the external cueing, that on top of it being rhythmic cueing seems to have the impact that we see music having on people with Parkinson's.
Thank you, Rachel. One of our participants has a very detailed question asking, is the research done on the modified staging scale that has recently come out in terms of the 0, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc., or is it done on the original staging scale that has been used in the past? I think she's referring to the Yohn and Haar.
Oh, the Yohn and Haar, right. That's part of the UPDRS. So everything that I've referenced here would be the previous scale. I'm not familiar with anything that has come out. As I said, I was referencing a search I did in 2017. So it's possible that something has come out since, but everything I referenced would have been with the old scale.
Okay.
I'll just add one thing from the dance, from the provision aspect of this, that the classes in these networks do not do a pre-screening. We do not prohibit people at certain levels of Hone and Yar to be participants. We welcome everybody. It's our job as teaching artists to think creatively about how to adjust and adapt material in the class to people at any level. But I think that's very important. We don't have a pre-screening test to come into any of these experiences.
So having said that, and based on the principle of the sooner you start, the better it is, what benefits have you seen at different stages?
Well, I try really hard to speak to benefits related to artistic empowerment and improvement rather than symptom improvement, because I'm not a clinician. So, on my side, what I see even from beginning of class to end of class is that people are much more musical. They're more confident in their movements. They're more confident in their balance. They're much more interactive with others socially during class. They're more comfortable exploring different kinds of movement and sort of getting out of the somewhat monotone aspect of the movement of our daily lives. That's not just related to Parkinson's, by the way. That's all of us kind of have set movement habits and patterns that we do throughout the day, and dance class gives us a chance to expand out of that. So I always say that people become better dancers as a result of the class, and I can give you hard and fast evidence on that. In terms of symptoms, because Parkinson's is so variable, I'm going to leave that to the individual research studies, but certainly the research studies have picked up on improvement over whether it's 12 weeks or 24 weeks that some of these studies have gone on for. There have been improvements in motor skills, in quality of life, in cognition, in fall risk, which is a very hard thing to study. One of the questions I have from the research is, do we see those same changes over a much more longitudinal study, say 3 to 5 years? And that we just don't know at this point.
Thank you for that, David. One of our participants just wants some clarification. What does TAU and RCT stand for?
TAU is treatment as usual. So that would be a dance participants of the research study would either be participating in a dance program or would just go on doing whatever they were already doing. So it's whatever they've self-selected to do. That was the comparison. And RCT is randomized control trial. So that's when two or more groups are being compared, but that you're being randomized. So you don't get to choose to be in the dance group or in another type of intervention.
Thank you. Here's a question. You said that people with PD are entering into the class as dancers, as artists, not as patients. So how does the program help a person living with Parkinson's change their mindset from that of a patient to one of a dancer?
It's a great question. I think the first is how the teaching artists and others in the program interact with the people coming into the room. So we immediately, from the moment they step in the door, we treat them as dancers, as dance students. We don't talk about symptoms with them. People may raise things with us or have questions about symptoms, but we're addressing those as teachers and as colleagues, not as clinicians. And by and large, these classes are offered in dance studios. Yeah. So the architecture itself, the venue, plays a huge role. You know, when you're stepping into the National Ballet School here, or the Mark Morris Dance Center, or the Juilliard School, where we also offer classes in New York, you are stepping into a community of people who are there to work on their skills as dancers and as artists, and so you become part of that. That's very different from stepping inside a clinic to do a therapy program, or a doctor's office, or even a gym, and you know, where there are set goals. I think here, stepping into an artistic space, it doesn't immediately make you a dancer, but it changes your mindset about why you're there and what your goals are.
So it's the immersion, basically. You're immersing them in the entire experience.
Exactly. It's immersion. I love the fact that at our dance center in Brooklyn and here as well, when the dancers step out of class, they are seeing other people in other studios working on their craft. So, you know, they really feel part of that culture. We also, because we're a performing company, we have our participants come see the performances. We work on Mark Morris repertory in those classes, so they are part of the artistic culture of the company, and that happens in a number of repertory companies where this program exists. So the dancers with Parkinson's really feel that they are part of that same community.
Thank you. That's great. That really is great. And I think we've got time for one more question. You had a quote in your presentation from one of your participants who said that they experienced joy, and that word kept coming up. You also mentioned that there's an improvement in cognition and even memory with dance and with music. Now, with those who've previously struggled with Parkinson's-related depression and anxiety, do you have participants report improvements in those symptoms as a result of the program?
So I can speak to the research, which is that symptoms specifically of depression have been studied, and we have seen significant improvement. Depression is comorbid in Parkinson's for two general reasons. One is the physiological changes, the chemical changes in your brain, and then also is the depression associated with dealing with chronic illness that can keep somebody in isolation and put them at risk for experiencing depression. So you're really combating sort of two different causes. And you're right that anxiety is also very comorbid, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen a research study that has specifically addressed that, although it would be certainly an interesting question. It's not necessarily something that someone has spoken directly to me about anecdotally either, so it would be interesting to look at.
Thank you. Yeah, I think anxiety and apathy seem to be the two that aren't studied enough, unfortunately. Well, I'm sorry to say that's all the time we have today for questions, and I want to To our audience members, just a reminder to please complete our online survey so we can bring you the programming that you want. Parkinson Canada values your feedback. And on behalf of Parkinson Canada, I want to thank David Leventhal and Rachel Barr and our event sponsors, Synovian, as well as everyone online for participating in today's wonderful webinar and for supporting us in bringing you the conversations you want and need. For more information on Parkinson's disease and dance, or to access a recording of today's webinar, please visit our website at www.parkinson.ca. And if you have any other questions regarding today's session, please feel free to contact us by email at info@parkinson.ca or call us toll-free at 1-800-565-3000. We have a whole new webinar series planned for you this year, and we hope that you will join us next month for our webinar At Ease, Accessibility and Neurological Conditions. This webinar will address the accessibility needs of people with various neurological conditions, contributing to what is known as invisible disabilities. If you're a person with a neurological condition, a care partner, an employee, employer, or job seeker, or ride public transit at any time, this is the webinar for you. And as we sign off, Parkinson Canada would like to wish you all a wonderful day.